If you are on your wealth building journey, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the exact strategy of how we got over 200 months ahead on our mortgage within less than 8 months. Sound too good to be true? Well, stick around and find out.
This is velocity banking, but the thought process is we're just going to take a different approach of what type of debt tool we use to be able to accomplish our goals. What is the real goal, and how can we leverage what it is we're doing to be able to achieve the true goal, which is WTF, wealth, time, freedom, being in a position to generate wealth by having full control of our time, and so that we can put us in a position so that we can create that true freedom, and whatever that freedom is, just the ability to do what we want to do when we want to do it, how we want to do it. What are these vehicles that we can use to get there? As much as we're going to talk about mortgages and banking, this is really just velocity banking.
If you think velocity banking is powerful, wait till you see this. Okay, I'm excited.
So the thought process is to just break down how we got there, how we did it, what were the steps that were taken. And so we kind of created an example. And this example is kind of based on what we talked about in our previous live, and that was we've got a $300,000 home, and you place a mortgage on that home. What would happen if we just took a different approach? Looking at this picture on a 30-year mortgage, we're talking about a $300,000 mortgage. $1,432 is the monthly payment. We did kind of throw in here PMI, because there are some assumptions that maybe you're paying PMI, maybe you're not, which equates to in total about a $1,682 payment. And ultimately, if you were to run this 30-year mortgage out to term, you'd end up paying in total, including PMI, somewhere around $545,000. So for a $300,000 home, you end up paying about $545,000. That's $245,000 that you gave to someone.
That's nice.
Who'd you give it to?
Right.
Right? It's $245,000 that you didn't get to use. It's $245,000 that in essence probably bought the bank a couple of homes. And in addition, how many times did the bank reloan or loan out that $245,000 to others?
Yeah, that part right there. Yeah.
And so I do want to set some little ground rules here. So let's just call it rules and assumptions, because I have to make some assumptions as it relates to what we're about to walk through. The first one being, this is velocity banking, meaning from a velocity banking perspective, if you do not understand velocity banking, don't just haphazardly think you can step into a first position home equity line of credit and be okay. And here's what I mean. You have to be able to understand how to use a debt tool, because a first position home equity line of credit comes with some, I'll say its own set of rules, its own set of guidelines. So you have to understand velocity banking. And in addition to that, there has to be positive cash flow. If there's not positive cash flow, this is not an option. Because again, you can get yourself in trouble if we're talking about a line of credit around the amount of $300,000. So there has to be positive cash flow. And then the other is, I'm not going to show him making any more income. Meaning the assumption in this example is he makes $6,000. He's got $3,000 in expenses, which in turn leaves cash flow of about $3,000. So I'm not going to, in this example, I'm not going to show any more, any bonuses, any additional dollar amounts going into savings. I'm going to show a certain amount in savings, a certain amount of cash flow, and I'm going to run this example out as a result. And then we're also going to talk about payoff, meaning paying off a 30-year mortgage versus leveraging a HELOC. So there are two different discussions here. I want to make sure it's clear that what I am talking about is leveraging your home to generate wealth versus paying off your mortgage. And then the last one is I'm going to ignore PMI. And here's what allows me to do that. Let's just say this home is worth $400,000. I am purchasing this home for $300,000 because the home is worth more than, because the difference between what the home is worth and what the mortgage is owed on it, there's a difference of more than that 20% that would require PMI. So I'm going to ignore PMI, just so we're clear. So before I can talk about a first position HELOC though, we have to first understand what is the difference between a first position HELOC and a second position HELOC. So I want to set just a foundation here of understanding around what it is I'm talking about. And there's just some fundamental differences between the two. And the first one kind of looks like this though. Again, if we're talking about a home, let's say this home is worth $400K. And again, the mortgage on that home is $300K. So I'm spending all of my life paying off this mortgage, these 30 years paying off this mortgage. But the difference between what the home is worth and what the mortgage is that I have on it, that's your equity, right? So if I have a $300,000 mortgage and the home is worth $400,000, what's in first position? From the bank's perspective, the most important piece of this equation is this mortgage, and this mortgage is in first position. If you wanted a home equity line of credit, usually you would go to a bank and they would say, okay, you have a mortgage of $300,000. We will now offer you a home equity line of credit, but that home equity line of credit is based off the amount of equity that you have. And so you'll get a certain percentage of that equity, you know, whatever the terms are associated with that home equity line of credit. And so that difference between the two, that home equity line of credit is considered the second position. So if the mortgage is in first position, then any home equity line of credit you get for the difference between what the house is worth and what you owe on it, the second position would be any HELOC that you receive. And so usually when people hear me say the word HELOC, they think I'm talking second position. But the truth is I am not. And in addition, just kind of walking through some of those differences, the first position HELOC literally replaces the mortgage, meaning the mortgage is no longer in place, and we're going to replace that mortgage with the first position HELOC. And then usually the interest rates on a first position HELOC are somewhat lower. Because the HELOC will then be in first position, the banks have an incentive to make sure you are maintaining that payment. The banks have an incentive to make sure you follow through. So they usually offer first position HELOCs at a lower rate. Another thing to note is first position HELOCs, when you refinance into a first position HELOC, traditionally that also is a cheaper process. Meaning when you get a mortgage, there's closing costs involved. When you get a mortgage, there's thousands of dollars that are also expended to be able to achieve your mortgage. Well, with the first position HELOC, it's a pretty clean process. And I think ours specifically may have cost under $1,000 to do a first position HELOC, convert from a mortgage to a first position HELOC. But when that mortgage is converted, if we would use that exact same visual and we replace the mortgage with a home equity line of credit. So what that means is now the mortgage is no longer there, and the cost of that mortgage is gone because we paid it off using the first position HELOC. And now we've ultimately just changed positions. The HELOC is now the most important tool as associated with the bank. And that is what you're paying your traditional, I'll call it monthly payment on, is now you have to pay off this balance of $300K. So all we're doing is replacing this mortgage with a first position HELOC. So we're talking about a $300,000 first position HELOC. We're not putting anything down, no down payment. The interest rate is about 7.3%. There's a 10-year draw. That 10-year draw just means I have 10 years that I can get money into and out of this product. And again, these numbers are the same: $6,000 in income, $3,000 in expenses, which means the cash flow is $3,000. Now, over that 10-year period, if we were to continue to make this $3,000 of cash flow and let that room live on that home equity line of credit, during that 10-year period, we would have accumulated a total of about $84,000. This $84,000 does not necessarily pay off the house unless we do some other things. But just simply allowing that $3,000 to live on the home does not pay off the home. That's the amount of interest that would be paid in a 10-year period. Now, if we're focused on paying off the home, which I'm not, but if we were focused on paying off the home, that interest, the total interest paid, would be right around $157K. And I think the amount of time it would take to pay off the home would be about 12.75 years. And this is, again, no extra dollars, just using the $3,000 a month as cash flow on it. It would take about 12.75 years to pay it off. But again, my objective is to not. So let me set the stage a little bit. You have your first position home equity line of credit in place. It's in place for $300,000. How are you able to use a home equity line of credit compared to a mortgage? Well, a mortgage is a closed-end product. So that $1,432 a month mortgage payment, you make that $1,432 mortgage payment for the next 30 years, the home is paid off in 30 years. A home equity line of credit is open-ended, meaning if you were to make that same $1,432 or whatever that interest payment amount is over time, if you only paid the interest into the HELOC, you would never pay it off. But because this is an open-ended product, and again, you have to understand velocity banking to understand what I'm saying here. If this is an open-ended product, meaning it can be used as a debt tool, that means all of my income can go into this home equity line of credit. What's this gentleman's income? $6,000 a month. What's his expenses? $3,000 a month. So if all of his income goes into the first position home equity line of credit, we pay expenses from the first position home equity line of credit, leaves $3,000 in cash flow. But there's something else that's special here that we did. And I'll try to make it a little bit bigger so it can easily be seen. But what we did was we have $50,000 sitting in savings. Because this is an open-ended product, because it can this dollar amount can be used for whatever you want, you can get money into it and get out of it. What is the point? What is the purpose of having a savings account? This is your savings account, or it can be used as your savings account. So rather than put $50,000 onto the home equity line of credit, we get the home equity line of credit for $300,000. And then the second step is to take all of our savings and dump it into this first position home equity line of credit. So we take our savings, put it in, we take our income from month one, put it in. That's a total of $56,000. When we do that, the balance on that $300,000 first position home equity line of credit drops down to about $250,000. And then when you put your income also onto that first position home equity line of credit, it knocks that balance down even further. But we do have to pay bills. And so when we pay bills out of the first month, it jumps back up by $3,000. But I want to pause here at month one.
Some people might have went, 50,000, where'd you get the 50,000? The profile was, this is how 40 years old, they had the down payment for the house.
$50,000.
And $50,000 for down payment for the house. And instead of using it for the house, we used it in this is how we're using it to leverage it even more. Because if not, and they put it in the house, the reason why I put the money in the jail is because it's all locked up inside of the house. They can't use it, which is why a lot of people don't want to use all their savings, even if it is to get better terms for down payment for a house.
There's a lot of moving parts here, right? Had $50,000 in savings, we wiped out savings. We wiped out savings and dumped that into the first position HELOC.
That's right.
And in doing so, that may make some people nervous. But the reason it should not, as it relates to a first position HELOC, is because this is an open-ended product.
Right.
Meaning, just because I put $50,000 into that home equity line of credit, it does not mean I don't have immediate access to that $50,000 if I need it.
And Benita's on LinkedIn. Her mind is blown. She says, I needed the charts and graphs to understand this. Thanks, Donnell.
So the only reason she stated that is because she's on me all the time about how do we represent this visually. And I'm a math guy. I jump right into the numbers, and whatever you want to do, you do. So she wanted to just reinforce the fact that it's not just her that needs these things represented visually. Everyone else does too. Point made.
Yes, if you're a visual learner, where are my people at? Let me know, because I do think that this is important, being able to see the difference.
So what I wanted to do was just simply prove these numbers that I'm showing you. So what you're looking at is if you go to calculator.net, click on mortgage calculator. This isn't anything that I created. It's right there at your fingertips. And all I did was punch these numbers in. So if we're looking at the same $300,000 mortgage over a 30-year term at a 4% interest rate, what does this look like? Well, again, I'm ignoring, let me say this again, I am ignoring PMI. I'm intentionally ignoring this calculator is not including PMI. So with no PMI, what we're talking about is over a 30-year period, over 360 months, you would have paid about $515,000. You would have paid about $215,000 in total in interest. So using in a mortgage. And again, after month one of paying that $1,432, at month one of paying that $1,432, the new balance, the ending balance on your mortgage would be $299,568, the same number that I was showing on that slide. Well, if you have a first position HELOC and you dump all of your savings in it and you dump all of your income in it, and it knocks that balance on that HELOC down from 300,000 down to 248. Where does that 248 lie on this amortization schedule? Again, this is it, end of year 4. How about 277? No, we were less than that. How about 252? No, we're way less than that. Okay, here we go. 248, it's somewhere between here and here. So in month 1, we became 100 months ahead of where we would have traditionally been in a mortgage by simply taking our money and putting and just adjusting how we apply our cash to our asset. So instead of leaving that 50,000 sitting in savings, and we'll get into what happens when you do, and taking that 50,000 and dumping it into the debt tool, it immediately put us 100 months ahead on where we would traditionally be inside of a mortgage.
It's powerful.
Huge.
Well, for most people, they would have even put it on the house.
Oh, we'll get there.
For sure, left some of it in savings.
Yeah, we'll get there. I promise we'll get there. So again, my point is this. Starting in month 1, it put us in a much more positive position as it relates to just simply equity. This difference between here and here is 100% accessible, meaning if you needed a portion of that $50,000 to go pay a bill, fix a car, take care of an emergency, it's 100% accessible. So this didn't handicap you. This didn't now all of a sudden prevent you from being able to use your savings. And what this visual is also looking at is, what does it look like over 24 months? Well, over a 24-month period, and again, I am using the same amortization schedule that I just kind of showed you, the 101 months at month 1. Using the same amortization schedule would allow us to, over the next 24 months, put you in a position to where you would be 133 months ahead of where you would have traditionally been in a mortgage, meaning that mortgage would look more like 289, 219 compared to 211, 209 is where you would end up after 24 months. How much interest would you have paid on the home equity line of credit? Well, and how much interest would you have paid at that same point in time related to a mortgage? The difference between what you would have paid at the same period of time, you save about $102,000. Meaning, had we had a mortgage and it took us 157 months to pay down that mortgage, you would have given the bank $135,000 in interest at that same point in time. So by doing this function, by treating your home as a tool, by getting a first position home equity line of credit in place of the mortgage, yes, you still spent money on interest, but you did not spend $135,000, which means ultimately you saved $102,000 by just simply taking a different approach.
It's crazy, right? Right, guys?
And as I mentioned, I know my cash people are probably freaking out. So let's say you didn't put $50,000 onto the home equity line of credit. You didn't do it. Matter of fact, you don't even have a home equity line of credit. You got your mortgage, you got the 30-year mortgage, and that $50,000, again, you decided not to put a dime down, and you put that $50,000 into
high yield savings account.
A high yield savings account, bringing you 3%, I think is what this is saying. Yeah, about 3.045%. Well, that same $50,000 over that same 24-month period would have made you about $3,000. So inside that high yield savings account over that 24-month period, you would have made $3,000. But you would have missed out on an additional $99,000 over that same period. And I did not leave out my cash people, because here's an argument that you can make. Okay, Donnell, I see what you did. You took that $30,000 HELOC and you said no down payment, but when you put $50,000 onto that $300,000 HELOC, it's no different than putting $50,000 down payment onto the HELOC. You're right. So let's say you do the exact same thing. So before you close on that $300,000 mortgage, you bring $50,000 to the closing table and you decide that you want to dump $50,000 into the mortgage.
Yep.
What would that look like?
Follow us over to the next video to find out.